Drum roll, please. It's time for another installment of Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent playlist. We're going to continue to obsess about drumming on this episode. So we jump back into the year 1979. I'm Matt.
I'm Cheryl.
And we're going to add two songs to our playlist from 1979. Of course, our last episode was a special about the death of one of the great studio drummers, Jim Gordon. I'm still reeling from that episode and the preparation leading up to it. In fact, I put on Song Cycle again by Van Dyke Parks just for the second time. I'd only listened to it the one time. I'm going to be obsessed with this record show. This might end up replacing Spirit of 76 as my current cult obsession.
Okay.
I love it. I love this record. It is so cool. It is, you're right, it is very quirky. And so a couple other things popped in my head listening to it. A, it's like Syd Barrett writing for Broadway.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
B, now I mentioned before, if you're a Sufjan Stevens fan, you could definitely see some roots of his stuff here. But I also started thinking about Mercury Rev, the Deserter song.
I do really like Mercury
Deserter
Rev.
song.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get a lot, of that vibe too.
I think it must just be his vocals that are turning me off because the songs, the music I can see, I think I would like, and I just have to listen to it some more. But
oh God, the instrumental arrangement of Donovan's Colors, it's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
Sublime.
Yeah, I'll have to give it another chance and try to get past the vocals.
I don't resist it because the vocals fit for me because it's just a quirky, esoteric, original, very individualistic work, and it works for me. I mean, his vocals, they're weedy, nasal,
yeah,
and there's a lot. They put a lot of effects on his vocals too, which make it just kind of trippy and interesting. That I was reading about a particular effect that they developed and used a lot on the vocals, which is fascinating to me. That before computer technology, all that went into this experimentation in the studio, certainly the Beatles and George Martin were responsible for a lot of these developments of this era. But this is a cutting edge recording for 1967, a very early 8-track recording too. And they put the studio to full use on this one. It is a fascinating listen.
Well, it's probably an interesting companion to Pet Sounds and Smile, and just to, because it's an extension of that. And
particularly Smile.
Yeah. And I still need to go, and I'm going down the list of Jim Gordon, and there's still things that I want to listen to that I haven't quite gotten to yet, just to things I'd never heard before that he played on.
Yeah, I didn't get to the Zappa stuff. I know you...
he plays on the song apostrophe. I listened to that. Not like anything else that really he had done before. So it's kind of interesting that he's part of that band. And it's, long drum breaks and kind of solos, which he doesn't really normally do. It's interesting.
Yeah. No, the breadth of his work is staggering. Just the more simple background stuff that he's doing on the country dates, all the way to very elaborate stuff that he's doing with Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
He played on jazz records, country records, hard rock, funky stuff. I mean, it's all there. We do want to continue to talk about drums because I know the song that you're choosing this week is from Led Zeppelin's final studio album, In Through the Outdoor. One of the two singles they released from that album, Fool in the Rain. And that song probably known, best remembered for the drum track by John Bonham, who, of course, is deservedly recognized as maybe the king of the hill in terms of rock drummers, certainly hard rock drummers.
Yeah.
I'd put Ian Pace up there and some others, but Bonzo is just incredible. But he plays a famous shuffle on this track. So now you're a drummer. Before we get into the details of this song, explain what a shuffle beat is and how and other songs where you might recognize a shuffle beat in the rhythm.
Well, the most well-known rock songs are probably Toto, Rosanna,
Jeff Porcaro.
Jeff Porcaro, Bernard Purdie, which basically they named the Purdie Shuffle, after him, which songs that he did with Steely Dan, like Home at Last, and probably the one that people mostly know is Babylon Sisters. So that's a shuffle beat. Are we going to get into this now?
Sure.
Okay. So if you were going to learn how to play the drums on Fool in the Rain, and you had a teacher who just says, this is what it is, basically. So it's polyrhythmic. It's a halftime shuffle. The drums are in 4/4. The song is in 12/8. So you're going to play eighth note triplets on the hi-hat. And a triplet is kind of like this. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. So that's the shuffle
Yeah.
That's the triplet count. So you're going to play eighth note triplets on the hi-hat. You're going to have an open hi-hat on the let of 1, ghost notes on the trip of 2 and the trip of 4, an accent on the count 3, and then the bass is going to be on the 1, the let of 2, and the let of 4. There you go.
What's incredible, I mean, it's so complicated, yet when you hear it to the average listener,
Yeah.
it doesn't sound that complicated.
It doesn't, because he's so good. And here's the other thing too. So I'm like,
because
okay,
it gives you this laid back feel.
it's all about the feel. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to play this song. So I can practice exactly what I'm, reading on sheet music or that breakdown that I just gave you. And sure, I might be playing the right rhythm and time. I'm playing the ghost notes and which a ghost note is just like a light tap. Yeah. But it's not going to sound anything like John Bonham unless I have the right feel. And this is one of those songs too, where really, truly every limb is working. It is an exercise in multitasking, which all drumming is, but this one is like to the max. But once again, it's the feel, because it has that groove to it. I've been trying to play this song all week. And I still can't do it. But in order to really play it, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but you probably have to be in an altered state of consciousness, because you have to...
Well, we certainly know Bonzo
Yes.
was probably that.
Yes.
Certainly at this point for Led Zeppelin. And it's important to note where Led Zeppelin is at this point in their career. Bonzo and Jimmy Page, neither of them are in a particularly good way at this point.
No.
They're starting to get weighed down by their addictions. Bonzo is a raging alcoholic. Jimmy Page in the throes of heroin addiction, been a couple of years now. So they put out this masterpiece, Physical Graffiti, in 1975, which was my album choice. Although since I picked it, 2 albums have been a rivalry to knock it off the perch, and that would be Spirit of 76, which I've been listening to incessantly, which actually came out in 75. And the Jeff Beck Blow by Blow album, which I've been listening to nonstop lately. Just love that. Talk about great drumming. Richard Bailey. There is a name that's not a household name. Incredible work on this album, on Blow by Blow. Anyhow, Physical Graffiti, double album. Even on that record, they're drawing on songs that have been laying around, songs that they'd recorded for 3 and 4 that hadn't been used, and for Houses of the Holy. In fact, Houses of the Holy, the song, is on Physical Graffiti, which was recorded for the album of the same title. The Presence album comes out after that, and all sorts of misfortune surrounds that album. Robert Plant had been in a bad auto accident, which had damaged his ankle, had to be sitting down for a lot of his vocal takes on that. He had the tragic death of his son from a viral infection around that same time. And Jimmy Page is starting to get weighed down by this heroin addiction. Presence it's a tough listen.
Yeah.
It's a lot of what made Zeppelin special was just the breadth of influences, not just the hard rock, but drawing on British folk, on classic 50s rock and roll and R&B. Funk music starts to come into play, certainly on the Crunge, on House of the Holy, and Trampled Underfoot on Physical Graffiti. Presence is a lot more single-minded. It's a heavy album pretty much from start to finish. It's kind of a cold-sounding album, not the warmth of their previous works, but it's got a lot to offer, too. By 79, Page is still really struggling. They record In Through the Outdoor at ABBA's Polar Studio in Stockholm.
Mm-hmm.
And more than any of their albums, Page kind of is more in the background in terms of songwriting, and John Paul Jones steps to the fore. And John Paul Jones is getting very interested in synthesizer technology at this point. So you got a lot more poppy sounds and synth sounds on this
very
album.
synth heavy, which is really unusual for them. And it's basically dominated by John Paul Jones and Robert Plant. They had kind of separated into 2 camps at this point. You had Plant and John Paul Jones would come in during the day, lay down their tracks, and then Bonham and Page would come in at night. And so they weren't even really crossing each other's paths much during the recording.
Yeah.
And there is some really interesting, definitely like All of My Love, very synth heavy.
Love the synth sound on that too.
Yeah.
He's using a early Yamaha synthesizer. It's got a really warm sound to it.
Mm-hmm. And then Carousel Lombra, that song is just like a relentless synth part repeating through the first half of the song. It's like a 10-minute song. The first half, it overpowers the song.
I like that track for the most part, but the final section kind of loses me.
Yeah, I think it just feels unfinished to me, I guess.
In the Evening,
Yeah.
which leads off the album,
Great
which
song.
is, and it's got this bizarre guitar solo. It's one of the interesting things, Page, in the later Zeppelin albums, the guitar solos start to get really more angular and strange, less blues-based.
Yeah. So this album definitely has a much different feel to it than any of their other albums. It's their last studio album. They did have another album that was released after John Bonham died, but that's just a collection of tracks that they had already recorded. And John Bonham's, he died in September of 1980. The album came out later in 79. So he died within a year of the album coming out. And they were actually preparing for a tour. So anyway, this song, it is definitely a drum tour de force. There's this thing that's been happening lately in the recent years where they isolate tracks. You can find them on YouTube. There's an isolated drum track for this song. Go onto YouTube and find it because it's so amazing. And the drum part of the song just has a life of its own. And it isn't perfect. It ebbs and flows, but it just has so much feeling behind it. And that's what makes it so great. It is nearly impossible to replicate. For one thing, Bonham always played custom-made Ludwig drums. He played with a 15 by 26 inch bass drum. Now, in comparison, Ringo's a 14 by 22. That's an average size. You might go up to 24. He goes up to 26. And for a while there, he was playing with a double 15 by 26 bass drums until Jimmy Page basically told him, you have to stop because I can't. It's just way too loud. And that is one of the trademarks of his sound, too, is that booming bass. Think of like when the levee breaks.
Yeah. Or Custard Pie, that drum hits at the end.
Yeah.
Just so powerful.
I mean, it just resonates through your whole body. And he just had such a touch that is so unique. I could probably play the song, but I will never be able to play it in a way that sounds anywhere near like it should.
He had that incredible combination where he could swing, he could play funk, and he had the touch, but also the power like nobody's business.
Yes.
So he used that big bass drum. Didn't he use huge sticks too?
Yeah.
Bigger than, yeah.
And then also there's that kind of Latin samba break in the middle. Robert Plant actually was the one that wrote that part because he'd been watching the World Cup in Argentina. And so the music from that, so they just added that bit in there, which is also really cool.
Led Zeppelin didn't release a whole lot of singles during their life. This kind of part of the modus operandi of this band was we're an albums act. We're not about singles. We're not going to release singles, but sometimes the record company had other ideas. So there were a handful of singles and things that made the charts. A Whole Lot of Love was released on a 45 and made the top 40. Jamaica, an Immigrant Song, were released as 45s. Yeah, no real singles of any impact from Presence. Trampled Underfoot was released to radio. From Physical Graffiti made the top 40. And then Fool in the Rain and All My Love. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure about All My Love. I know that got played a lot on FM radio, and it certainly sounds like a song that could have been released as a single.
Yeah.
On second thought, I'm not certain on that. Coda and Song Remains the Same, which was not a good live representation of Led Zeppelin. It was recorded toward the end of a tour when they were a little haggard, and they were hot and cold live. I mean, when they were on, they were amazing, but often they weren't. And I've said this before. I don't think Jimmy Page is going to the Hall of Fame as an improviser.
Yeah.
It's really not a strength. His strength was creator of indelible riffs and his, studio mastery.
Right. Yeah. He was a session guy. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a better album than I remember. I mean, I really like every song on it. I think it's unloved because it's the least rocking Led Zeppelin.
Yeah,
it's it's the poppiest one.
It's the poppiest one. It has
they're recording at ABBA's studio. Of course, they're going for more of a pop sound,
right? And it's a heavy synth sound, which is unusual for them. It just sounds so much different than their other albums. And I think if you take it out of context, like on its own, it's a good album. If you compare it to the others, then it's just not. It doesn't quite maybe live up to what your expectations would be because it is more poppy. It's not heavy but I agree. I think it's a good album. One of the things too, when this album came out, it had some gimmicks to the artwork and the cover First of all, it was in the outer sleeve was like a brown paper bag, sort of looking like a bootleg. It had like a stamped, the album title stamped on the front. And then the inner sleeve was black and white, but I guess if you washed it with water, it would become colored. And then there were 6 different sleeves, 6 different outer sleeves, and it was basically the same photo, but like from different angles. So when you bought it, it was in the brown paper bag. You didn't know which one you're going to get because it's sealed, and it's certainly a gimmick to try to get people to buy more copies of the album.
A couple of bands picked up on that concept in the years to follow. I know Abacab, the Genesis album, had a bunch of different cover variations.
Synchronicity has like 30 different color variations. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was designed by Hypnosis, who they're most well known for Pink Floyd's album covers, particularly Dark Side of the Moon. But they've done like Alan Parsons, Genesis, Paul McCartney, Styx. That might be one of the things that this album is most known for at this point now, is the album cover.
Yeah. Is it my favorite Led Zeppelin album? No, it's not even in the top half, but it's better than I think a lot of people give it credit for. And it's curious to speculate on where Led Zeppelin would have gone from there had Bonzo not passed away. And I think they did the right thing in calling time on the band because, he was such a critical element to their sound and their chemistry. Jimmy Page, I believe, had said they were already kind of planning the next album. It was going to be more of a back to basics rock album.
It's interesting, actually, because I think the only other band I can really think of that had this kind of a scenario was The Who, when Keith Moon passed away, and they chose to forge on, find a new drummer. They kind of went the opposite effect and found, a timekeeper rather than someone who was very unique all over the place. They went with Kenny Jones. And, they got a lot of backlash for it, too. And I think that Pete just decided he just didn't know what to do. So he just forged on with Zeppelin. It was like they just knew that they just couldn't go on with someone else.
Which is interesting because for the legacy of the band, I think it worked out beautifully. The long-term legacy of the band. In the short term, Robert Plant went on to a solo career and did his own thing. And Jimmy Page, one would have expected, could have continued to produce vital music, but it just didn't. It never happened.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
And John Paul Jones, I don't know if he went on to do more like arranging and orchestration, things like that. But even when Plant and Page got back together, he wasn't part of that equation. And it's also interesting, too, because The Who, they've really, even though they had their farewell tour in 82, and then they've really never stopped. And they did something that actually Led Zeppelin now has done in the more recent times. The Who brought in Zach Starkey, who's Ringo Starr's son, who basically is like can emulate Keith Moon like no other. Plant and Page brought in Jason Bonham, John Bonham's son, who would probably be the closest person that would be able to carry on that legacy. They didn't do that right away. That took them years before they went in that direction. Bonzo was like Keith Moon. His drumming is larger than life.
Yeah.
And actually, he was really influenced by Carmen Appice. They toured with Vanilla Fudge in the late 60s, and that's where he got the idea of bringing in this huge bass drum sound, because Carmen Appice would play with a double bass, a 26-inch bass, and so he actually modeled his kit after Carmen Appice's kit. He's one drummer that maybe could have tried to step into that role, but they just didn't go that direction at all.
So you got to wonder if there's at least one more Zeppelin reunion in the cards. John Paul Jones, Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, all, reasonably healthy.
Well,
Plant continues to put out interesting new music. Jimmy Page basically has made his career out of curating the Zeppelin legacy. Just, hasn't done a lot of recording of note since the dissolution of the band. He was on the Death Wish soundtrack in the early 80s and formed The Firm with Paul Rogers from Bad Company. They put out 2 records, and Radioactive was an interesting single. Again, strange Page guitar solos on those Firm sounds.
Yeah.
But, those albums didn't really stand the test of time so much. If they were to reform one more time, if it weren't Jason Bonham on the drums, you kind of wonder who they would put or who you'd like to see on the drum stool.
Yeah, I don't know. I like Carmen Appice maybe, but is he even still alive? Like Carl Palmer. I don't even know if these guys are alive anymore. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a handful of them that
I'm trying to think of more modern, more modern drummers that could fill that role. I can't really think of any modern equivalent of a John Bonham.
Maybe Dave Grohl, you know.
It would have to be, right?
I mean, he's the go-to guy now. He's like the rock guy. And
Well,
really,
he'd be the first one in line for the gig. I know that.
Yeah. Taylor Hawkins, but he's no longer with us.
Right.
That rock genre, it's not as prevalent anymore, I suppose. I mean, Dave, the first one that comes to mind is always the Foo Fighters and Dave Grohl. And then from there, I don't know.
It's impossibly big shoes to fill.
Mm-hmm.
I got to think, and it's going to come down to Robert Plant, whether they get together again. I think Page and Jones are ready anytime because the money is just incredible.
The thing is, Robert Plant has his own career and is continuing to put out really good albums.
Yes.
Actually, his last album, which came out maybe 2 or 3 years ago, is so good. Carry Fire. It is. I love it. It is one of my favorite albums, definitely in the last decade, I would say. It's really, really good. And all the stuff he did with Alison Krauss, like his solo career has a life of its own, and it's much different than what he was doing with Zeppelin. So I don't know if he'd be interested in that because he's kind of on a different path now. But it is surprising, especially in this day and age, when every band from the 60s and 70s has gotten back together and cashed in. Zeppelin's one of the hugest bands ever. And it is kind of surprising that they haven't done that.
So Fool in the Rain gets out of the playlist. 1979, I was 4th, 5th grade, and I certainly would have been unaware of this particular artist, although this song that I'm going to pick here would make the American charts 4 years later in 1983, and it was actually a top 10 hit for Tracy Ullman, who is not a recording artist. She's a British comedian, very good one, very bright, funny lady, and she had a hit song with the cover of this. The song's called They Don't Know, and the artist is Kirsty MacColl. This was her first solo single in 1979, came out on Stiff Records. Stiff Records, very important label in England in the punk new wave movement. That was Ellis Costello's first label.
Nick Lowe, The Damned,
I think, their first stuff. So very important independent label in England in the late 70s. Kirsty MacColl was the child of Ewan MacColl, British folk musician, and her mother is Jean Newlove. Ewan MacColl left the family when Kirsty was very young and started a relationship with the American folk singer Peggy Seeger. Interesting documentary about Kirsty MacColl. She was this precocious youngster, very advanced intellectually. And there's a funny old news clip from London. When she was a little girl, they focused on these gifted children, and they spoke to her and to her mother about how she was very advanced in reading and mathematics, at a very young age. So very bright, got obsessed and fascinated with music from a young age, and became a lifelong obsession for her. In particular, the pop music in the 1960s, and she mentioned the Beach Boys, listening to Good Vibrations over and over and over, incessantly picking out every part, particularly the vocal parts, now they put together. Very good singer, although as a solo vocalist, she's not going to knock anybody's socks off. Not particularly great range.
Yeah, she doesn't seem like a
voice.
Technically great singer. Yeah.
No, but she has a distinctive sound.
Yeah.
And what made her special, and she had almost a genius level gift at this, was recording in the studio her voice and putting together these masked multi-part harmony parts. She would become legendary on the music scene as somebody who could nail vocal parts in one take. She would eventually form a romantic relationship with the British producer Steve Lillywhite, legendary producer who first hit the scene in the late 70s with Susie and the Banshees and Ultravox. And then 79 was a big year for Steve Lillywhite. He produced XTC's Drums and Wires album. First of a great, great run of LPs. So we'll be talking way more about this band. If I don't pull something off Drums and Wires, I certainly will off their next album for 1980, Black Sea. But he would produce Peter Gabriel's third album, the Melt album, the one with Games Without Frontiers and Biko on it. He would produce the early U2 albums, Simple Minds albums from the early 1980s.
Which Kirsty MacColl sang backup vocals on. Sparkle in the Rain.
Right. So her first solo single on Stiff, They Don't Know, It is just it's a classic pop sound from the early 60s, really drawing from the girl groups of the early 60s. And just a beautiful pop melody, something you could have heard the Shangri-Las or the Shirelles doing in the early 60s, something you could have heard the Beatles laying down on one of their first couple of albums in 63 and 64. Just a great simple melody, a super catchy chorus. And then there's this, I'll use the word again, sublime moment, epiphanic moment, where she hits this high note before the last verse and chorus coming out of the bridge, baby, and it's just nails that. And what's interesting now, the re-recording, which was, a sizable hit in the UK, I think it hit number 2 in the UK, if not number 1, and then top 10 in America. Tracy Ullman, not a singer with, she's not a professional singer. She's an actress and comedian. Decent singing voice, but pretty average, not a lot of range. She couldn't hit that baby note. So they actually punched in the same clip of Kirsty MacColl on the Tracy Ullman version of the record.
I thought she was singing vocals on that with her, like she was recording backup vocals too.
She co-produced and did backup vocals,
okay.
But when they get to the baby part, that's actually the Kirsty MacColl. It's the same.
Oh, okay.
Clip.
I thought she just sang it again. I didn't know they actually punched in the same. Okay.
No, they just punched her in, which I think is incredible.
And it is one of the best parts of the song too.
Oh yeah. But the song is it goes on my playlist of perfect pop songs. Just not a note out of place. And it's a throwback. It's the lyrical theme. Everybody's telling me I shouldn't go out with you, but I don't care. They don't know what we've got. Yeah. They don't know about us. They've never heard of
love. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know the Tracy Ullman version. Actually, one of the reasons why I know it the most too, is because when they play the video on MTV, at the very end of the video, they show Tracy as a passenger in a car and Paul McCartney is driving the car.
That's in the Tracy Ullman video.
In the Tracy Ullman video. So that was always like super exciting for me when I'd see it on MTV. And I've always liked the song, but honestly, I've just now gone back and listened to the Kirsty MacColl version and I've been watching live clips of her and learning more about her. And now I find her version much more endearing. Like because of her as a person, her personality too. And I think Tracy Ullman's is fine. And I can see why it was a hit. Yeah. But I really like Kirsty MacColl's version much better.
No, I certainly remember the Tracy Ullman version and liking it. And I never bought the single or anything, but I remember hearing it on the radio and enjoying it. I might have even taped it off the radio on an old tape in a box somewhere. And then Tracy Ullman would have a sketch comedy show on American television on Fox. Very good show, very clever. She's very, very talented lady. And then her claim to fame would not end up being this song, which was a hit record on both sides of the Atlantic. Her biggest claim to fame by far was introducing The Simpsons to American audiences. Before The Simpsons was a TV show on its own, it was a segment on the Tracy Ullman Show.
Yep.
And I remember watching that show from the beginning.
Yeah, I did too.
And enjoy it. Yeah. They spun off The Simpsons off the Tracy Ullman Show. And of course, that went on to be, they're still making new episodes.
Yeah, they are. It's the longest running show ever.
I'm almost embarrassed to admit, I've never regularly watched that show.
Really?
No. And I do love it. I appreciate it. I enjoy it. I've just never gotten the habit of there might have been a time like early 20s, post-college, when I might have watched new Simpsons episodes on a semi-regular basis, but really outside of maybe a year or two, no, not.
I watched the first 20 years regularly. And then I tapered off after that, but I still watch them every once in a while. And I've gone back and watched the old ones with my kids. All of the first probably 10 seasons.
So one of these days, probably before the kids out of the house, we'll start to binge watch.
Yes. Look up what are the best episodes and watch those because you just can't weed through. There's just too much. And Kirsty MacColl, she had some experience too working on sketch comedy. She was on French and Saunders doing music, really. She was in a few sketches too, but she was mostly doing
For those who aren't familiar, this is a British comedy show.
Yeah. Jennifer Saunders, who went on to do Absolutely Fabulous, and Dawn French. It ran from the late 80s to the early 90s. After watching the Kirsty MacColl sketches on that, her songs are very quirky, kind of storytelling. And on the French and Saunders, she always has these two guys backing her up that are really goofy. One of them plays congas and he's just all unkempt and he always has like a black eye or something. Like looks like he just got in a bar fight. And the other guy's this really nerdy looking dude with his hair slicked back and these glasses and he's playing guitar and they do funny little things. And she just plays the straight woman just singing her song, but the lyrics are, definitely quirky and funny too. And then she had another big hit in the UK, a Christmas song.
Oh, yes.
With the Pogues.
It didn't make our Christmas Mount Rushmore, but Fairy Tale of New York has become this annual tradition in the UK. This massively popular Christmas song with the Pogues, and Kirsty MacColl does a guest vocal turn on it. It has a rather notorious couple of lines that would probably get edited out on some radio stations now for being not politically incorrect. But yeah, no, that's one of her biggest claims to fame in England, certainly being a part of that show. And she's, in a way, she's kind of like Harry Nilsson, where great songwriter, brilliant songwriter, but a lot of people know her best from recordings of songs that weren't hers.
Yeah.
That one, she had a hit with Billy Bragg's A New England in the 80s. Released as a single, and then a cover of the Kinks' Days was one of her a brilliant cover, by the way.
Yeah.
I should mention. I've just really come to adore this woman. And when you think of our generation and the losses, the early deaths in music that were most impactful, probably the two biggest would be John Lennon and Kurt Cobain. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
For me, I would add two ladies to that list. Kirsty, who died tragically, and there's a whole story behind this too. I don't know how much we want to get into here because this isn't the last Kirsty MacColl song I'm going to pick. Certainly, she died in a boating accident where she was swimming off the coast of Cozumel in Mexico and got hit by a speedboat that happened to be carrying wealthy heir to a grocery store chain in Mexico and was in an area that was off limits to motorized boats. She was swimming with her two children and shielded them from this boat and got struck and killed instantly. And this has been a long-running issue to see somebody come to justice for this, and it really never happened. Basically, in Mexico, if you're rich enough, you can buy your way out of any crime, just by paying money to the courts. It's a sad state of affairs. There's a whole thing behind this incident. If you want to go down that rabbit hole.
What year did that happen?
2000, which is tragic because Kirsty MacColl, brilliant songwriter, brilliant recording artist, but didn't leave behind a large catalog of songs. There were long periods of her career where she was not very active, as a solo recording artist. She got dropped from multiple labels. She was off stiff pretty shortly after They Don't Know came out. They Don't Know was not a success financially. And then she was at odds with the label heads and had recorded a second single that was never released called You Caught Me Out. Bounced to Polydor. Her first album came out on Polydor, but she wasn't with them for long. She was very headstrong. Again, very bright, very intelligent woman who knew what she wanted and wasn't going to be bossed around by anybody. She was beloved by those who knew her friends and fellow musicians, but record execs and engineers probably cowered in her presence because she was brassy. She is not shy about expressing her opinion, and it's going to be my way. And when I mentioned she had this preternatural ability in the studio to record these harmony parts, she basically would breeze in there and the engineers would try to direct her and she'd be like, piss off. I know what I'm doing here. And she did know what she was doing.
Yeah.
She would go into that studio and just knock out these brilliant layered harmony parts. She would kind of shift her position on the mic. She knew exactly what she was doing. And she'd most of the time knock it out in one take. It was incredible. And you'll see on her list of credits, she shows up as a backing vocalist on numerous records in the 80s and 90s. A lot of Steve Lillywhite's productions she was a part of. But her own albums had so many gems on, and a lot of just great singles, even when she wasn't releasing albums. As I mentioned, A New England, Days. She had a song called He's on the Beach in the mid-80s. Brilliant single. Terry, another great single from the 80s. Just not really well represented by albums. I mean, the first record had some cool stuff on it. More of a kind of a pub rock vein, very influenced by bands like Rockpile and Nick Lowe and Dave Edmunds and the kind of sounds they were producing, Elvis Costello. Then, before she got dropped by Polydor, she was experimenting with kind of more European synth dance oriented stuff. Only a few of those songs have surfaced on a 2-disc collection called From Croydon to Cuba. Her best album is probably the one from 1989, Kites, which has a lot of brilliant stuff on it. Her biggest hit in America came off her next album, Electric Ladyland, and that was called Walking Down Madison. It had kind of the baggy feel, Happy Mondays, In Spiral Carpets kind of influence. She actually performed live with Happy Mondays during this era.
It kind of has that feel like Tom's Diner, the one that came out with DNA that has the backing track on it. Yes. It sounds very similar to that with Suzanne Vega. Yeah.
And here she starts to experiment with Latin sounds too with My Affair. And this would become a real obsession for her, not only the music, but just the whole culture in Latin America. And she was basically starting to spend more and more of her time in Cuba and in Mexico, and influences those sounds became more pervasive on her records. Kite and Electric Ladyland came out on Virgin. Oh, did I say Electric Landlady, not Electric Lady? It's a clever pun on the Jimi Hendrix album, Electric Landlady.
Yes, it's hard to not say Electric Ladyland, Electric Landlady.
Not Electric Larryland, not Electric Ladyland. It's Electric Landlady.
Landlady.
Yes. Electric Landlady came out. Cheryl, when you and I were working at Silver Platters, I didn't know anything about Kirsty MacColl. I certainly knew They Don't Know from the Tracy Ullman single. I didn't know anything about the writer or that it was Kirsty MacColl's song or that she sang on it. I didn't know anything about her until we were working at Northgate Silver Platters. And this new guy started working there. And I didn't like this guy. I didn't like him at all. But he came in there and he seemed to be kind of ambitious, like he was angling for a management position. And a few of us who had been there for a while were a little bit like, who is this guy who's trying to... But he tried to turn me on to Kirsty MacColl. And I think just because of my personal dislike for him, I shunned it. It didn't do anything for me. I didn't like it. So it was only later on when I started to dive more into Steve Lillywhite's work, and I noticed that he'd produced a couple of her albums and that she sang on a lot of his other productions. And I started to get more interested. And then I picked up the Galore collection on Virgin, which is the first time that They Don't Know had showed up on a CD. It had never been anthologized until that collection came out. And oh my gosh, there's so much great stuff. And that opened the door to what's become an obsession. Now, her last album that came out shortly before her death, called Tropical Brainstorm, this is where she's fully embracing the Latin sounds of Cuba, of Brazil, of Mexico. And it is a brilliant record. It's her best album, in my opinion. And there's one other song on that record that people might recognize. It's called In These Shoes, which was used on Sex and the City. A lot of people might be familiar with her as well.
I didn't know who she was at all, and I only now going back and looking at like what she sang on as a backup singer too. Like she was on the Wonder Stuff, Welcome to the Cheap Seats, which is, that album came out when we were working at Silver Platters too, and I loved that album so much.
Yeah, I like that band. Yeah.
She also sang on Nothing But Flowers, the Talking Heads song. She was on Smith's song.
Still Steve Lillywhite involved in that.
Yeah, she sang on Ask by the Smiths and other Smith songs, and actually collaborated with Johnny Marr.
Yep.
And songwriting.
On Walking on Madison. That's his instrumental track, basically. His guitar on that. And then she also covered You Just Haven't Heard It Yet, Baby by the Smiths.
Yeah. So she was involved in a lot of these bands that I really liked and listened to these albums. I just didn't know who she was or her name or anything about her.
Yeah, but just for me, the music, the gateway via Steve Lillywhite through the Galore collection, and then listening to her albums, and then just learning more about the person. She just seemed like somebody I would have loved to have known, to have met. She was legendary for throwing these parties. People just adored this woman. And, she was smart. She was tough. She was not shy about expressing her opinions, yet at the same token, very vulnerable. And that comes through in her music, in her lyrics, where she'd been unlucky in love. The marriage with Steve Lillywhite didn't work out. He was cheating. So there was a lot of pain from that. Didn't have a lot of luck in relationships. And then later in her life, she met this young guy, much younger than her, and started spending more time with him. And things were looking up and things were looking a little more positive. And, there were more lighthearted moments on that last album, whereas her previous record, Titanic Days, very depressing listen.
I mean, just the
Um,
name of the album sounds like it
yeah,
would be. Yeah.
that's the breakup album with Steve Lillywhite. That fed into a lot of the music on there, and one thing that puts off some people from her music, it's very heavily produced. They're big budget studio creations. Most of these out now. Her last record, she pretty much self funded that, but she worked with all these brilliant Latin musicians, so it's a lush sound on that too. Even though maybe not recorded in the best studios with the best engineers like her previous records were.
That's why
Her,
I like the French and Saunders performances because it's just her and these two guys backing her up.
yeah.
And it really does kind of showcase the vulnerability in her songwriting and her delivery. And then some of it is quirky and kind of funny. And it's a comedy sketch show. So there's like comedic things happening kind of in the background while she's singing the songs. But it works. It works really well together on multiple levels.
Well, I'll go back to her death, too. The two deaths that really rocked me, her passing and then Amy Winehouse, who was such not only a super gifted original vocalist, but an incredibly powerful writer and had so much more to offer that we'll never get to hear. But Kirsty's death really shook me because here's this artist that I'd become aware of 10 years previously and didn't want to know about it. And finally, I was like, God, what was I thinking? How could I have missed out? And just as I'm starting to really discover in her catalog and this brilliant new album that she released, Tropical Brainstorm, she's gone. Brainstorm came out in 99, 2000, not shortly before her death. It had been, 7 years since her previous. So it's just all this wasted time where she didn't release any music, and now we'll never get anything new. But we'll just have to appreciate what's left. I mentioned the 2-disc collection from Croydon to Cuba. There was also a accompanying DVD collection. There's a lot of music videos that she produced during her time, thankfully, and a lot of clips of her live on television. She was a very reluctant live performer. That was part of the problem too. Horrible stage fright. So didn't perform a lot of live shows, didn't feel comfortable in a live setting. And again, just as a solo voice, she's not going to knock your socks off. She's she's not Mariah Carey,
Yeah.
But what she does, she did brilliantly, and she's left us quite a legacy of her catalog. There's worthy, brilliant music from start to finish there. All right, we have a few episodes yet to go before we finish off 1979, but this woman here has been haranguing and pestering me to put forward an album.
I'm probably not the only one. I bet our audience is waiting too.
Well, I've teased this album already a few times, I think, along the way, and I know nothing is going to kick it off the top spot, even though there's so much great music from 1979 and still stuff that I'm discovering as we go along here, but The Clash's third record came out at the end of the year in England. It actually came out at the beginning of 1980 in the United States, so we could do it for 79 or for 80. And it is, in my opinion, the greatest double album in the history of rock music. Now, that's a bold statement because you got stuff like Quadrophenia and Tommy by The Who, Beatles' White Album, Blonde on Blonde, Freak Out, Physical Graffiti by Led Zeppelin, all great.
Exile on Main Street.
Exile on Main Street, all great records, but this one is it for me, which is interesting because...
What's the album? You haven't told us what it is
Yes, I have.
yet.
Didn't I?
No, you just said
Clash's
the third
album?
album by The
All right.
Clash.
It's called London Calling. It starts with the album cover. Is there a better album cover than this?
I don't think so.
Holy smokes, is that cool. You don't even need to know the reference there, and it is a reference to an Elvis Presley album. Elvis Presley's first RCA album had that same font and the pink and green letters. What a cool picture of Paul Simon on the bass about to destroy his axe on stage at the New York Palladium, September 79. Penny Smith, the photographer, one of the great iconic rock and roll photographs and one of the all-time great album covers. So that's before you even put the vinyl on the turntable. You get this amazing vibe off the cover. So before we talk about it, I want to go back to 1979 when I would have been 10 by the time I heard the song on the radio. And it was the Clash's commercial breakthrough in the U.S., the single Train in Vain. I didn't like it at all when I was a kid. I don't know if I hated it, but I didn't like it at all. I didn't think it was very good. But it would be years before I kind of got punk new wave, and you didn't have to have this, traditionally good singing voice to put your your song across. I wasn't ready for that at age 10. So,
Yeah, because you were still listening to disco
oh,
too, and
sure.
which is very
Yeah.
vocal
And a
oriented,
lot of
and
and a
yeah,
lot of black music, which I mean,
yeah,
if you're gonna have a hit in the soul R&B realm, you're gonna have some chops, whether you're playing or singing. Um,
yeah.
so it was college when I listened to the album the first time. Now I'm getting it. Now I'd gotten into the Buzzcocks and punk, but still at this time I'm thinking, yeah, there's some really cool songs on here. There's some filler too, other things that don't do it for me. And then over the years and more listens, you realize just how great this album is, start to finish. So the Clash, obviously a punk band, one of the original bands to come out of the '76 scene, inspired by the Sex Pistols, as so many were. It was kind of a combination of two different groups coming together. Mick Jones, the guitarist, had a group called London SS, which included Terry Chimes and Topper Hedden. I don't know how both drummers ended up in that group, but Paul Simonon was the bassist. And then Joe Strummer was in a pub rock band called the 101ers. They had a single called Keys to Your Heart, which I think came out after the Clash started releasing records, I want to say. I don't know that they had a contemporary single out when they were actually together.
Yeah, I don't think it was released before.
Most of this band, very much working class London, except Strummer, who is the lyricist, the main lyricist and the main lead vocalist. He had a public school background. Again, if you went to public school in England, you're a rich kid. It's like the opposite of the United States. Public school in England is what we consider private school. So he was in a boarding school, son of a diplomat, actually born in Turkey,
Yeah.
and lived in a lot of different places. So worldly, educated, intelligent man. I never had a lot of love for the Clash, so didn't care for that single when I first heard it. Didn't really get into London Calling until after Combat Rock came out. And I actually really didn't get into it until after they broke up, to be honest. When I was in college, they were no longer a going concern.
Yeah, really, Combat Rock was the first album that I owned, and but I did have London Calling when I was in high school, and I had my copy of the album did not have Train in Vain on the track listing.
Right, yeah. The reason for that was they stuck it on there at the last minute after they'd already done the album artwork, so it doesn't list.
It was supposed to be like an extra,
Yeah.
like a flexi disc and any NME that was given out, and then that fell through, so they just threw it on the album after printing.
And some would say that it does feel kind of tacked on there because it's a very poppy song, but it's not really a traditional pop song. It's very one note throughout. You got that in da 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 da. Everything's over the top of that riff. There's very few changes
Yeah.
on the song. Now there's a vocal melody over the top of that. But yeah, there's a couple other Mick Jones's songs tend to be poppier than Joe Strummer's. But anyway, the Clash had these hardcore fans that they would just deify this group. I was never one of those. But this album I love. I mean, I think this album is just head and shoulders way beyond anything else they did. And that includes the first album. I'm not among the adherents of that first Clash album. I rate that below a lot of other original
Punk albums.
punk stuff like Ramones and Ramones, Saints, Buzz. I could list a whole bunch of things that I would rate above that first Clash album. Not that it's bad. I don't love it. It's a raw production. They smooth things out dramatically on their second record when they got Sandy Pearlman to produce. The producer of Blue Oyster Cult, his main claim to fame, also produced the Dictators album. So he
Mm-hmm.
had some punk cred there. And Pavlov's Dog, another kind of obscure band, it's been forgotten now,
Kind
more
of
of a hippie type
prog-ish.
band.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So dramatically improved the sound. Of course, the guitars are very powerful on Give 'Em Enough. And there's some great songs on Give 'Em Enough Rope. Safe European Home, I rate that right up there with some of the best Clash stuff. Tommy Gun, that's a killer tune.
Mm-hmm.
I've never listened to the album.
Stay Free. That's one of my favorite songs, actually.
I still have never listened to Give 'Em Enough. I've never listened to the album. What do you think of that album?
I think it's good, but it's definitely, for them, it's overproduced. The vocals are too low in the mix, and yeah, it doesn't pack the wallop and punch because of the production more than the songs.
Yeah, a little too slick.
Yeah. But there's some really great songs on that album.
Yeah, this is a perfectly produced album. Perfectly produced. It's a beautiful recording. It sounds amazing. The drum sound is great. The guitar sound, everything sounds great. It's punchy. It's very heavily produced. There's a lot going on this record, but it is not slick in the slightest.
Yeah.
It still has that punch and that edge, which makes it perfect.
It's still raw.
Right. Now, the producer is a guy named Guy Stevens, who's somewhat legendary. He would not be long for this world after this album. He would only be alive for another year or so. Pretty young guy, although old compared to the band members. Bill Price is the chief engineer. And if you look up Bill Price, you'll see his name pop up on a lot of great records that sound really good. And likewise, Guy Stevens. So Guy Stevens didn't produce a ton of records, but what he did produce is very interesting. He was kind of a scenester back in the early 60s, a DJ, very influential upon a lot of the original blues boom British bands like the Animals and Rolling Stones.
The Who.
He was out DJing in clubs, playing these American R&B and soul records, and then he worked for a label that put out reissues of this stuff. So a lot of these British bands that borrowed from American black music were influenced by Guy Stevens back in the day. He eventually worked for a label and broke into producing records. Troubled guy, had issues with drugs and alcohol, spent time in prison. But you look at the stuff he produced, the main one here is Mott the Hoople. So he kind of discovered these guys, gave them their band name, he managed the band, and he produced 3 of their first 4 records, their self-titled debut, their second record, Mad Shadows, and then their 4th record, Brain Capers. What most people know about Mott the Hoople comes down to one song, essentially, All the Young Dudes,
All the young
in
dudes.
America at least. So Mick Jones was a huge Mott the Hoople fan in the early 60s.
He would go backstage and like got to know them, hung out. He was at the show so often, they knew who he was. And
Mott the Hoople was pretty much done by the time punk was rising, but it was one of those bands that a lot of punk guys would have liked because they had that they had that heavy quality. They were a real working class kind of band, kind of crazy. People didn't want to mess with him. And there's disputing versions of how involved he really was in the production of this record. A lot of people are saying he didn't really produce it. He was just kind of there to inspire them and create atmosphere in the studio. As far as really hands-on with the sound of the record, maybe not so much. I don't know if that's true or not. All I know is that his name is on these records as a producer, and they all sound great.
Yeah.
Those Mott albums, Free's first album, Mighty Baby, which is a band a lot of people don't know about. Seek them out. Really great band, turn of the 70s. He produced their first record. So, Guy Stevens has to get some credit here. The album just sounds incredible. And what really impresses the most is just the variety on here, not just musically, but lyrically. I mean, Joe Strummer is an incredible lyricist, and there's just no topic off out of bounds for him. I mean, they're still tackling the kind of punk stuff, rebelling against the man in the system and anti-racism, anti-corporate culture. But there's just all these unusual topics that he's taking on these songs. And all of the songs just stand so clearly on their own as great pieces of work. I've heard criticisms of this album that it doesn't flow, it doesn't have fluidity. I cry bull on that. I mean, some of these songs run together and seamlessly, even though they're so different.
Yeah.
And there's no song that breaks the flow of the album for me. It's just one delight after another.
I think maybe people might say that because there's so many different styles on this album, but it isn't like they don't fit together.
Yeah.
And really, I would say of all the styles that are represented, punk is probably the least of them all.
What would be the most punk song on here? Clampdown, I guess. Clampdown or
Death or Glory, but it's still not it's not hard. It feels like it should be more punk because of the lyrics but it doesn't have a punk feel to it in the song itself.
London Calling in a way, but I mean,
It's
it's
driving
very
and it's
atmospheric.
yeah.
It's driving, but it's atmospheric at
Yeah.
the same time, which is incredible. That's an incredible accomplishment in the recording of this song to get those two attributes in the same
Yeah.
record. And you want to talk about starting with a bang. That's the first track on the album, and one I'm sad to say I've kind of overlooked over the years. When you try and nail down your favorite songs of this record, I always kind of look past London Calling. That was the big single in England to reach number 11.
The lyrics are poetic
Yeah.
on that song. I mean, they really are. I think that's some of Joe's best lyric. I can see kind of overlooking that song a little bit because it doesn't have a lot of changes to it, but it probably is the most punk song on the album, really.
Yeah, and here's where the production is key. Because there's so much going on in the mix on this song to create that atmosphere.
Yeah.
Little vocal things going on in the background, just sounds in the background that add to the atmosphere.
That's one of the things I like the most about The Clash is that Mick and Joe singing together. Like you have the London Calling, and then you've got the verse coming in, and they do that a lot, especially starting on this album. And I think it's actually one of the vocal interplay like that. It's kind of like Supertramp, like the two different vocalists that are very different sounding voices, but the way that they work together, it's really cool. And they do that in this song.
And I got to talk about vocals here too, because neither Joe Strummer or Mick Jones is a traditionally good vocalist. Very little range, not great voices. But, and for years, my take on this album was, great record, great songs, great production. If you want the weak link, Joe Strummer's voice. Joe Strummer's not a good singer.
Voice.
Well, I don't feel that way anymore. Now he doesn't have a great voice, but it's a vocal tour de force on this record. His vocals are great. And again, that gets to the producer. It's the producer's job to make sure that the takes that go on the album are the best takes. Sometimes that's the first take.
Like Brand New Cadillac.
Second song on the record, Brand New Cadillac, is like a first take recording or early take. And then they're all like, well, wait a minute. What do you mean that's the take? We sped up at the end. We can't use it. It's like, and Guy Stevens is, again, this is why you have a producer. And there's all different kinds of producers. Some producers are hands-on. They're on the board. Others have no like Rick Rubin doesn't know a damn thing about the technical aspects of recording an album.
Yeah.
He's about creating a vibe and and an extra set of ears. So guys like, I don't care if it speeds up. All great rock and roll speeds up.
Yeah.
It's not machine music.
It's a live performance, really.
Yeah. Then you got Jimmy Jazz, and here's the first track where you're thinking, maybe it's filler, bit of a throwaway, but it's so cool.
And it's jazz. Like it really is jazz. It has a sax on it. It's got,
I don't know what this song is about, but what I'm picturing is, the police are trying to track down somebody they suspect of a crime, and it sounds like they're going into a house where a bunch of people are high as a kite and trying to track down Jimmy Jazz. Or
like a mafia thing or something. Yeah.
And this is where Joe Strummer's vocals are so great because he's got all these little characters that he's doing with his voice.
He tells a story, and it's not just in the lyrics, but in his vocal delivery too. Yeah.
Yeah. So they got Hateful. It's a great rocker. And then the first really great song on here, I think. And I think this album is at its best when they're doing their version of reggae because they do it so well.
Yep.
They do it so well. Rudy Can't Fail, which is an original song. It sounds like a cover of some classic ska tune, but it is theirs, and it is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And now you got to talk about the instrumentalists here and the band members, because you want to talk about a band taking a quantum leap in ability from their first record to their third. The playing on this record is spectacular, and it starts in the rhythm section. Yeah,
especially Paul Simonon on bass. Unbelievable. He didn't even know how to play bass.
He just picked it up.
First album, like he'd only been playing for like less than a year, and now he's laying down those rhythm tracks on this album. It's pretty incredible.
I mean, Joe Strummer is, he's the main lyricist, and it's kind of his vision. A lot of the Clash's imagery
Well,
is a lot of his vision.
Paul Simonon actually is the one that was really the visionary with their style. He was doing their clothes, their stage set.
And a lot of the reason I've been kind of cold on the Clash over the years, and really still kind of now I am, is a lot of their image put me off. It seemed a little gimmicky with the way they presented themselves and the clothes and the street guerrilla stuff. I wasn't really buying. A little too earnest for me. But Paul Simonon, is this not one of the coolest guys to ever step on stage in a rock and roll band? I mean,
yeah,
he's an incredibly good-looking guy for one.
Yeah,
and he's totally authentic, totally street.
He's for real. He's the real thing.
He's actually quite gifted artist, and he was an art school guy. And like you said, he had never played an instrument, basically picked up the bass when he joined the band. So one of the things I'm listening to last night when I put this on, I'm thinking, I never really focused on the bass listening to this album. And what I'm thinking I'm going to hear is, the guy who understands how to support the song. He's got that thundering low, heavy bottom, which comes from reggae and dub, which is a big part of their sound. But he's not going to be doing a lot with it. He's going to keep it pretty. No, there's some great bass parts all through this album. He's killing it.
And there's at least 2, maybe 3 songs where he actually plays the disco bass. Like you hear the umba in there.
So, so he has no trouble with the ska too. And then ska obviously puts a lot of emphasis on the rhythm section, the bass and the drums. And then Topperhead, what a great drummer this guy. I mean, Terry Chimes is the first drummer, pretty basic, held down the beat. Topperhead's coming from a prog soul background, very gifted, very technically sound. And this is one of the great drummer albums of all time. One of the great. This album is nowhere near as good as it is without Topper on the skins. Not even close.
Yeah, and it's not super obvious initially, I think, and especially because of all the different styles that they're doing. I mean, just reggae drumming is hard. I mean, you're playing on the offbeat. So much of it is feel. And, you've got all the other songs that are more just rock and roll based or even punk. They still have interesting fills, different parts to them. It's, they're more complex because he brings that into the songs. That's been like a more recent discovery for me, actually. Kind of like a hidden surprise, a hidden surprise that's right out in the open. It's
I've revisited this album frequently over the years, and that was a breakthrough discovery for me a few years ago when one of those revisitations, like how great the drumming is on this. So you get the blue beat feel on Rudy Can't Fail. Now you get into the interesting lyrical stuff with Strummer, with Spanish Bombs, about the Spanish Civil War, and then The Right Profile. That's a fascinating track, which is about the actor Montgomery Clift, who was kind of a sex symbol, but also a very talented actor from the Method School in the 50s and 60s, who had a auto accident that kind of disfigured him, and he got addicted to drugs and alcohol. And now when you hear about Guy Stevens' issues, you kind of wonder if there isn't a connection there with the drugs and the alcohol. Now, Lost in the Supermarket, when I first was getting into this album in college, that one wouldn't have grabbed me. But now I hear that and a couple other tracks on this album, and I really hear the template being set for a lot of 80s alternative music, kind of via Mick Jones.
Yeah. That's always been one of my favorite songs.
I wasn't born so much as I fell out. What an opening line. Incredible line.
And that's one of those songs where you get the disco beat at the end. Paul Simonon plays that sort of disco, that disco bass.
And a cool part of this album, they stretched into a double. A lot of these songs, they do kind of go on and jam out for a while at the end of the song and extend them that way, but they never outstay their welcome, ever, in my opinion. That's a good example there. Clamp Down, that's more typical Clash territory, but it's still a thumping rocker. Then the Guns of Brixton. Whoa, gosh. If you're a bass player, what an incredible, and this is Paul Simonon getting a chance to take on the lead vocals.
Yeah, the first time he's done that on any album. And actually the first song he's written that is on one of their albums, because he was like, I got to start writing some songs because that's where the money is.
Yeah, yeah, very practical man.
Designing, jackets, and that doesn't really get me anything, but yeah.
Huge bottom end on that song.
Oh, yeah.
Wrong'em Boyo. Wow, what a great track. This, again, taking the ska reggae influence and just killing it. And the intro, I mean, just showing their chops off now, how they can handle a variety of styles of music and changes of dynamics and beat and tempo.
Yeah, it's almost like girl group style backup vocals in that song too. But that's one of the 3 covers on this album.
Yeah, that surprised me too. I didn't realize there were 3 covers on this record. One song I didn't realize was a cover. Death or Glory, again, if you're narrowing down the great songs on here, it's just a powerful song and a very controversial. I'm surprised that lyric slipped by without more notice. I certainly can't say it on our podcast. It's weird. It's a PG podcast, but the reference to nuns in the church, amazing that didn't cause more of a stir in the United States. If this album were a little more popular, maybe there would have been more fuss about it, but Joe definitely got away with one there. Incredible song.
That's one of those songs that actually really has a post-punk sound to it to me. Like it almost sounds like Television, like it could be on Marquee Moon or something. It's very similar to that.
And again, Topper Headon's drum part on this, so critical in the dynamics of that song.
Mm-hmm.
Coca-Cola taking on another unusual subject. By 1979, cocaine was really proliferating, and not just in the rock and roll scene, but in big business as well. And they're specifically looking at the advertising world. People are starting to get into the nose candy pretty heavily.
That song kind of seems like it could have been on The Who Sellout if they were bumping it up a notch to something a little more controversial.
The card cheat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Guy Stevens, one of his famous quotes was, "There are 2 Phil Spectors in this world, and I'm one of them." Now, here's a perfect example. Now, if you want to know how influential guys, this has the Phil Spector wall of sound to it.
Yeah,
huge sounding
yes
track here, and this is one that it took me years to really grasp and get into, but now one of my favorite tracks.
It's got the military sound with the trumpets. It's kind of got like this military sound to it. And Mick Jones is on lead vocals on this one.
Really good vocal by Mick Jones. Very passionate lead vocal on this.
Yeah.
Lovers Rock, very sly lyric on this.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you analyze it, at least my take on it is, guys, when it comes time for lovemaking, you got to make sure your lady gets her pleasure first before you get yours.
Yeah.
That's basically the theme of this song.
This is one of the only songs that has like a clean guitar sound on it too. It's a different guitar sound on this one. It's much cleaner.
It's got a slinky vibe to it.
And it has that disco bass at the end too.
4 Horsemen is one that jumped out at me listening last night that hadn't before. It's like, this is like the hardest rockin' song on this album.
Yeah.
It's kind of buried deep in the record, but it's the most straight ahead rock song on the album. And they're a force.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they can play well in so many styles, and they're almost bragging about it. If you listen to the lyrics at the end of the song, they're kind of bragging about it. I'm Not Down, again, one of my favorite songs. It's just
very 70s rock sounding, cool syncopated
melodic
drums.
Yeah.
And it kind of has that guitar sound, sort of sounds like Thin Lizzy to me on this one.
Revolution Rock, again, bringing in the reggae feel. And of all, I love
Revolution Rock. I've always loved this one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great vocal by Strummer.
And it's the 3rd cover on the album.
Yeah. See, that's the one I didn't realize was a cover.
Yeah, I didn't either.
It's a wonderful Strummer vocal on this. And then Train in Vain is just a killer pop song.
It is. It's really kind of a perfect pop song.
Yeah. So there just is everything on here is at minimum interesting, beautifully played, beautifully produced. And then you've got just killer, classic, all-time great songs all throughout this record. The recording, the production, the album, everything about it. It is 5 out of 5. One of the not just greatest double albums of all time, but top 25, top 20 great rock records ever. Has to be.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, one of my favorite reggae and dub records. Reggae. It's not as much dub as Sandinista. I told you earlier that I have kind of a controversial opinion.
I thought I had a controversial opinion from you. You didn't echo that, but yeah, I did. So what's your take here?
I actually think that Sandinista is as good as London Calling.
Okay, well, that's different.
If you consider the third album as okay, let's say that like this happens now a lot. There will be a re-release of the album and they'll put out like a whole extra album of outtakes or songs that didn't make it. If the first two Sandinista albums, that's the original release of the album. The third album is just outtakes. I think that double album, and now a lot of people say that they think Sandinista should be pared down to a single album would be great. I don't. I think a double album is as good as London Calling. It has the range. It actually delves even deeper into, you have to really like reggae and dub to like Sandinista. And I do a lot. So that's kind of the barrier maybe that a lot of people can't get past. There's some amazing songs on this album, and I've always loved London Calling. I've always thought it was one of the greatest albums ever. Sandinista is one that I haven't just gotten into more in like the recent years, like maybe the last 3 or 4 years. But I think there are as many good songs on that album as there are on London Calling.
Well, once we get to 1980, I'm going to have to see if I can echo your opinion. I have it over here. I've never really listened to that record.
I think a lot of people haven't because they're put off by it's a triple album. And you know, one of the things we didn't say about the Clash is that when they put their double album, their triple album out, they priced them the same as single albums. They were always really fair to the fans. They didn't want to gouge them. And actually, they had an EP that came out right before London Calling, between Give 'Em Enough Rope and London Calling, called Cost of Living. And it had the song Capital Radio on it. And that song was actually originally released in 1977 as a promo only kind of thing that you had to send away to NME with like a coupon and the sticker from the debut album. And you get this flexi disc, and it had the song Capital Radio on it. And then a couple like interview things. Well, that started becoming really collectible and being sold on the market, you know, for like really high prices. And so they released this EP that had I Fought the Law, their version of I Fought the Law.
Great version of that.
Yeah. And 3 other songs. And one of them was a re-recording of Capital Radio because they wanted people to be able to get the song without having to pay these collectors' prices. And you talked about kind of like how you were sort of turned off by their image and them being a little bit too over. That was real. They're the real thing in that sense. Like they really do, like Mata Hoople and those bands that really care. They really care about their fans. Even though when they signed with CBS, it was like a huge deal because it was a big contract and
£200,000 advance.
Yeah, and people were
big money back then. Yeah.
Giving them all kinds of crap for it, but it turned out that in the end, it was a really bad deal for them.
Well, and the fact they cut the prices on those albums, that came out of their royalties. That wasn't, that didn't come out of CBS's profits.
Nope. Yeah. That was coming right from the band. You know, after the Clash broke up, and we won't even talk about what they did after Sandinista because they had an album that should have never existed.
Well, Combat Rock was a decent record.
I'm sorry. I forgot about Combat Rock. No. Combat Rock I actually really like.
Yeah.
The album after that.
You like that more than I do. I thought it was hit or miss.
But then Mick Jones went on to form Big Audio Dynamite.
They did some cool stuff.
The problem with that is that it is so 80s produced. Like you cannot get past the production on those albums because I haven't
really gone back to the early ones, but the Megatop Phoenix, which came out in '89, that was a cool record.
I like the first 2 albums, but it's just almost impossible to listen to them now because they're just so 80s produced. But the Joe Strummer solo stuff that he did later, like in the 2000s, he's got 2 albums out that I love, Streetcore and Global A Go-Go. Such cool albums and very much kind of runs the gamut of different styles. And I just think he's incredible. I really do. Yeah. And it's
big heart in that band.
Yeah.
And I think it just pained him to his grave that he kicked Topper Headon out of the band. Topper sadly fell prey to a heroin addiction, and even more sadly, he really didn't kick it until well into the 2000s, and apparently he didn't touch the drums for like 25 years. One of the greatest drummers,
Yeah.
I think maybe the greatest drummer from the new wave scene. Obviously, Pete Thomas is a beast too, but that's just sad. Just sad. But Topper says, you know what? I have no grudge. I had to go. I was an addict.
Yeah.
Addicts lie, cheat, and steal. They just, all they care about is getting their next fix. They don't care who they hurt.
And especially Joe Strummer, because he didn't do drugs. He was a vegetarian since like 1971 or something. He was like, and yeah, he just couldn't have it. And like you said, Topper, he started out with Big Audio Dynamite too, and then they had to give him the axe too, even though they knew he was a great drummer and they wanted him, but it just couldn't happen.
Strummer passed young, but not because of the rock and roll lifestyle. You know,
no
heart defect he'd been living with, had no idea, and then, but so. Again, The Clash, I don't like The Clash as much as a lot of people do, but I like London Calling as much as anybody because I think it's one of the greatest albums ever.
They're the only band that matters.
So there it is, Cheryl. I hope you're happy. I've got my album out now. We'll get yours here in a couple of episodes. So Kirsty MacColl, They Don't Know. And They Don't Know, it definitely applies to probably everybody listening to this podcast. They're like, what? I don't know that.
You should know by now.
You should. And Led Zeppelin's Fool in the Rain are playlist editions this week, along with my favorite album of 1979 and one of my favorite albums, period, London Calling by The Clash. When we reconvene, we will talk about another of the great albums of 1979, in particular, one song from that, which I love, but certainly an album that could have been put forward as certainly one of your favorites from the year, I'm sure, Cheryl.
Yeah, and there's several songs that we've chosen and that we could have chose the album, too, that it came from.
And then another band that had a heavy reggae dub influence on their sound, particularly on their second record, and that would be The Police. So Supertramp of The Police, we talk about them in the next episode. Cheryl still got to get her favorite album out there. And then before we wrap up 1979, we'll bring in Cheryl's husband, Mike. Of course, they co-own the Silver Platters record store chain where you can buy all this great music that we talk about. 3 locations in the Puget Sound area. Mike will give us his favorite album and song of 1979 this year, and we'll recap and talk about some of the things that didn't make the list. There are so many.
There's a
lot of great also reds.
Yep.
We got to run down some of those as well. So more fun to come in 1979 on Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent playlist. But until next time, everybody, I'm Matt.
I'm Cheryl.
Thanks for joining us. Take care, everyone.